Welcome to Monday Morning Coffee with Inside the Firm. Each week, our hosts will be interviewing local, regional, and national business leaders to give you an inside peek into how they lead their business to success in the ever-competitive business climate.
Welcome to Monday Morning Coffee with Inside the Firm. Today, I have a special NDSU Go Bison guest, Rhet Fiskness, fellow alumni. He teaches as an adjunct professor of architecture at North Dakota State University, serves the community as a board member for a nonprofit housing developer, and is a board member at Burning Hearts Church. He is also the founder and principal of RHET Architecture. He is passionate about architecture and eagerly participates in design competitions, regularly completes Minnesota Design Team community visits, and provides pro bono architectural services to University of Nations, Calabar, Nigeria, Children's Relief Orphanage in Dondo, Mozambique, and Fargo-Moorhead Churches United for the homeless. His favorite project to date is the St. Thomas Aquinas. I might have mispronounced it. I apologize, Rhett. Newman Center Choir Loft, which won an AIA Design Award in North Dakota. Prior to receiving a Bachelor of Architecture degree from North Dakota State University, Rhett studied Modem Nordic Architecture at the University of Oulu, Finland. I might have mispronounced that too. Rhett, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you.
Any corrections that you should make there for my terrible interpretation of how they should be pronounced?
No, sounds good. I realized I need to update it because my favorite project keeps changing.
Oh, does it? That's good.
So it's always the next one.
Of course. Yeah. Which is great to be looking forward to, right? As architects. I mean, then you're like, when do you ever get complacent? Before we get into what you do, I mean, you do a lot of things. I really love all the volunteer stuff that you do. And I want to kind of dive into that a little bit because I do a ton of volunteer things too, and understand why you do it. But tell us how you got here. You know, are you from a family of entrepreneurs? Are you the first? Where does that spirit come from?
A little bit. So a little bit and a little bit not. So my dad's a 6th grade teacher, and I have a stay-at-home mom. So those are two very non-risk-taking occupations. However, my dad did have a side business of where he would he's a sign carver, and so his summers were spent going to community fairs and just working in the basement carving custom signs. So if you wanted a Lance Nell's Lake Cabin welcome sign, that's what he would create. So definitely had a little bit of self-initiative and for him to do that. And I probably don't necessarily see myself as an entrepreneur as much as just a small business owner and manager. I see entrepreneurs starting multiple businesses where I just have a business. So I do differentiate myself a little bit in that when I look in the mirror. I see a difference between, the entrepreneurial spirit, which I think is one of independence and self-reliance, that is shared by a lot of artists. I don't see a lot of artists necessarily thriving in establishing and creating business systems and then hitting repeat for another business system. So there's kind of a difference between the entrepreneurial spirit and someone who actually gets out there and starts something from scratch.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I don't think I've ever heard anybody phrase it like that. It's kind of it's a little flattering. I mean, because then I guess there is a differentiation between folks that go do the multiple businesses. I mean, I call myself a serial entrepreneur for whatever that's worth. And then maybe does when you frame it like that, does it help you sort of refocus? Is that sort of why you have that mindset of like, well, I'm a small business manager, so I'm going to do everything.
No, because I think I would prefer being an entrepreneur.
Oh.
But I think you need some humility and also just recognizing that there is a difference between what my role is now and what your role would be if you were an entrepreneur. I think the reason I say that is because when I've met I've had clients who come in and I know their resume, I know they're very accomplished, and they're usually pretty humble and they ask a lot of questions. I've also had clients who come in and they're like, "Oh, what do you do?" "Oh, I'm self-employed." Yeah. I've got, and then I find out that means they're jobless.
What kind of questions do you get on the side where you get the confidence, where they just have the natural confidence and therefore there's sort of this humility that comes with it too?
It's the questions they ask. They're there to learn, and they're asking questions to learn first, as opposed to having too much insecurity. I've had other clients who have too much insecurity to ask questions because they don't want to be perceived as not knowing what they're doing. And the ones who ask like I've had someone who they didn't hire me, and I was kind of shocked that they didn't. I thought I'd be the best architect they could possibly work with. And but in this interview, she was just calling, probably already had someone lined up, but was just trying to get more information on the process, almost using me to check the references of the architect that they were going to be working with. And I was, she was just upfront saying, this is my first project. I just need to get educated. Tell me about the process. Tell me about your fees. What do you expect? Is there anything I'm not seeing? And then I didn't get hired, and I was kind of shocked. And then I really think she was probably calling around multiple people, just trying to get herself educated. I had another client who called and, oh yeah, I'm self-employed. And, oh, what's your wife do? Oh, she's self-employed too. And then I found out, oh, I know your wife. And she basically worked for a temp agency doing secretarial work when secretaries call in sick. I wouldn't really call that self-employed.
Yeah.
And kind of posturing themselves as being a little more sophisticated than they were.
Yeah.
And that project, I did everything just fine. And then I see in the news, years later that that didn't quite make it.
Interesting insight. Yeah. I mean, the projection and everything. How have you carried that into so since you kind of, I feel like learned some lessons, or at least got a little bit more knowledge and experience of sort of how reading people and when they come in like that, how has that evolved how you sort of operate in those kind of first meetings with prospective clients?
I don't think it has changed those very much. The first, it's kind of like dating. And I usually want to come in with a slow pitch. And instead of just on the first date being like, oh, are you a morning person and I'm an evening person? Oh, how many kids do you want? Just be like, hey, let's just see if we like each other.
Mm-hmm.
And have it progress naturally, and promise less, perform more, not overpromise, is usually how I approach those, and try to feel them out and see if we're the best fit, and give them honest feedback and just say, hey, I think your expectations of me are different, and here's what I would like to correct. And if it still works that we work together, then that's great. But I want you to know what you're getting yourself into ahead of time. So I don't know that it's changed those meetings so much, because I've just done that always. But it has changed just me getting involved in more investment opportunities, and recognizing that, oh, I'm making kind of some of the same mistakes that I've seen some clients do. And for me, it's like a red flag, being like, oh, I'm getting a little too artist here. Love will not find a way if this project doesn't cash flow.
Sure. Yeah.
So recognizing that, I've got some tendencies here that I need to recognize and have a counterweight on. Yeah.
Beautiful. Tell us about when you started your firm. I'm sure, just like a lot of other folks, you left another firm. Whether you want to share those details of why you left or not. Some people leave and then they see all the bad things that happened at the other firm and they want to do the opposite. So I would love to hear everybody's origin story.
I can tell you the quick story. Was, I graduated, with kind of a vision on what I thought I wanted my life to be like. I wanted to run my own firm. I had that entrepreneurial spirit, and then I started my first job and realized I didn't know a thing about architecture. And
the business or architecture itself?
All of the above.
I
didn't know anything about business. I did not know anything about architecture. My very first job, my first task was to send a fax and I was too insecure just to
You're-
ask someone how do I use a fax machine. And that afternoon, my boss was like, Rhett, what happened to that fax? They said it was just a blank sheet of paper. I put it in upside down. I didn't even know what that was. I mean, just very humbled, and reached a point where I just realized that, wow, I've got to just buckle down and be an employee. And I quit any dreaming of running my own firm. I just thought, no, someday it might happen, and I'd listen to podcasts, I'd read books, I'd educate myself. I wouldn't say I lost that dream, but I did not pursue it.
And how long were you at that firm before you
Well, I was at
got the
several
confidence
firms.
back? Oh, okay.
Yeah. So confidence took a while. So I was laid off 3 times in 4 years, and then had a job at a large engineering architecture firm, and just realized, I'm like, okay, I'm all in on this, because low confidence. And I just buckled down. I had made it was kind of my own worst enemy, and I knew that, okay, I've got to be all in. I'm gonna just salute and say yes, sir. And over time, then went through a phase of, when I started architecture, I didn't know that I didn't know, and then shortly after, I knew that I didn't know. And then the process of me not knowing that I knew kind of was very gradual. And I remember there was a time working for this very large engineering architecture firm, and one of the more senior project architects asked me a question. And in my mind, first I'm like, why is he asking me? And then I knew the answer, and I was like, wow, I just knew the answer. And that felt pretty good. And then I'm like, why did you ask me? He's like, well, Rhett, you're the wood framing expert. And I was like, what? And I had a few projects then that I was responsible for that, didn't fall apart. I was responsible for them, and they were built and they didn't collapse. And I was like, oh, wow. And for the very first time, I was like, I knew that I knew at least something in this small niche. And then just all of a sudden, it was kind of like the parting of the waters. Several other circumstances opened up, and it was just so obvious for me if I'm going to start my own firm, now is the time.
Yeah. I assume you were licensed at that sort of inflection point. Yeah. Do you think that was that part of the confidence?
No, licensure didn't have anything to do with it. I could have been licensed earlier, and I wouldn't have had confidence. I could have been licensed later and just would have known what I'm doing without the license. I didn't, to be honest, I don't know how I passed the exams. I can't really remember. If I had to take them today, I'd probably fail them. The only one that I really feel competent in is lateral forces, because I had failed it, and then I really needed to study for the second round. And I have not done any calculations for earthquakes since. So
of course, I hear there's not a lot of them in North Dakota.
Yeah. So licensure wasn't for me a milestone. That was more of just a necessary evil of just the painful discipline of studying and taking a test. And I will say I failed 3 exams, the first 2, and then my last one. So the first 2, I thought, oh, I just need a confidence boost. I'm going to schedule the easiest test first. And I failed it. I don't know how to this day. And then I took the second one. Okay, I need an easy one. I need a confidence boost. I failed that one. I'm like,
wow.
What? And then all the ones that I probably should have failed, I passed. So I remember I took, in that era, there was 2 structural courses. I started studying for structures the night before the test, got home, from work, ate a meal, probably started studying around 6:30. And it was about 11 o'clock at night, and I was like, I didn't have a clue. I went through the study materials. I didn't have a clue. I'm like, okay, whatever. This will be just a $150 practice exam.
Yeah.
So I changed how I studied, and I just learned concepts, and I passed that exam. Which was kind of a joke. I'm kind of proud of that. I'm like, hey, wow, I hacked structures. So then when I had to take lateral forces, I did the same strategy. Well, then I actually failed that test, and that was the last one. So then I made it through, and got it behind me.
Yeah. If it's okay,
Yeah.
tell me about the layoffs. I was laid off
Yeah.
too, but it was strictly
Mhm.
not it wasn't a performance thing. It was this is the Great Recession. There's
Yeah.
no work. 50% of architects are laid off.
Yeah.
What were
Every layoff was blamed on the recession, but it was me. I'm my own worst critic. So I graduated from college with a big ego and insecure.
and tell everybody who's listening why the big ego? I mean, you graduated, you won, right?
Yeah. So I was the teacher's pet, won all the design awards, got all the scholarships, and the undergrad senior thesis won several awards with my senior thesis, and finished with I think an accurate understanding of my potential, but kind of maybe a prima donna attitude of where I just snap my fingers and everything falls into place, and needing to combine that with hard work, needing to combine that with some humility, needing to combine that with also just technical knowledge, none of which I had. And so the first firm I worked at was just, I hadn't sat still for more than like 90 minutes in my entire life, and had never had an internship, never really, all my jobs in college, I was self-employed. So I did have some entrepreneurial aptitudes. I paid my way through college building birdhouses and selling them at street fairs. And so all of a sudden you're sitting in a cubicle for 8 hours a day. That was just a rude awakening. And just wasn't used to sitting still for more than a movie. And so that was difficult. Also, it probably wasn't the right fit for me. And I got laid off after a year. They had several layoffs, but I was clearly not someone that I think would have been a good fit to stay there. And had a hard time focusing, basically attention deficit disorder, which I don't think it was that, but just imagine that kind of personality, just couldn't focus. My very first task was putting in spreadsheets, the square footages of every room in Loras College, Iowa. And I had, just my expectation was I wasn't going to be working in Excel for the first day. So my attitude wasn't so good. Laid off after a year. The next place that I worked, I interviewed, and this firm owner knew that firm, and he's like, "Look, if you didn't fit in there, I'm the opposite of them." So I just thought, okay, I'm gonna go to the opposite place. A great place to land, a wonderful firm, loved everyone I worked with. I was treated better than I deserved, but I was in a low spot and just really couldn't pull myself out of it. In hindsight, it was depression. At the time, I didn't recognize that, but knew something was wrong. And then the economy dipped and I was laid off. Fortunately, I did kind of rally myself towards the end there, and I was actually was able to have a few victories under my belt, just in accomplishing something and not feeling like a total loser. The next job was my dream job. I got hired by a startup firm, and my job description was doing international design competitions for an entire year. And just all creative, all the time, carte blanche design, and really had some fun. But we never won anything that resulted in money. Did get some like honorable mentions or some recognition, which kind of patted the ego, but wasn't really practical. And this was a firm where that was a lot of ups and a lot of downs, feast and famine, and just clearly that type of, the handwriting was on the wall. This isn't going to last forever. Felt, and then I thought, well, I don't know what to do. I don't know if I'm going to be an architect. I got my real estate license and just thought, well, let me give this a try. Sat down with a realtor who as a family friend, and, I kind of told him my story, where I was at. And then he's like, okay, Rhett, yeah, you can do this, but get licensed first. And then if you want to be a realtor, you can come back and work for me. And I was like shocked. I'm like, are you joking? You've known my family my whole life, and you're not even letting me. You're not hiring me. And I kind of feel like it was a godsend. Just like, I tried to quit and I failed. So again, kind of a low point. If you ever fail at quitting, it's not exactly an ego boost.
Mm-hmm.
An opportunity then opened the door for me to work for this large engineering architecture firm. And I had a completely different attitude than when I graduated from college. Just, yes, sir, whatever it takes, wake up early, stay late. And actually this firm had a culture of just 40 hours a week, which I appreciated. I was kind of pigeonholed in apartment projects, which, some of my peers who I had graduated with were designing wellness centers for universities and cool, company headquarters. And I was basically the drafter for apartments. But the architect I was working underneath was an expert in the codes. I learned the codes through him. I learned his process, and it allows me to create a niche, which then was the opportunity to start my own firm in just basically having a niche doing apartment buildings.
Yeah.
That's the detailed story of how this came about.
That was, I did not expect us to go in this direction, but I really appreciate it. So now I have two other questions regarding this. How does God play into this?
Yeah.
Because I know from reading your bio, and I follow you on Facebook, and I've seen, I know you're a believer, and so am I, and I'm always interested to see, like, where does God play into this? Because you hit some very low points, and there's this inflection point. If you're like me, then you're probably looking for providence all the time to kind of reinforce the proof. Yep. And then, so where does God play into this? Second one is, what advice would you give to students that are kind of in your trajectory, where I've seen those very bright burning stars, and then they burn out, and then maybe they never even come back, but you came back, and now you have your own practice.
Yeah. So where's God play into it and everything? So depending on the audience, I can share my faith, or I can stay secular. But since you opened the door, I really don't see my work and my calling, my God-given calling, as being inseparable. Some people are called to be pastors. Some people are called to be a stay-at-home dad and homeschool. And I feel like a call to be an architect. And so I just thought that, well, I can't quit. I felt like God sheltered me. I tried quitting, and I just feel like that was my guardian angel, just preventing me from going the wrong path. And if I had to really credit my success, I mean, it's just from not quitting and God's faithfulness. So I certainly felt that there were times when, okay, I'm doing the right thing. I'm well fed. I got a full night of rest, and I just need to stick with it. So, that was maybe some of the misunderstandings of, when I graduated, I really had I was growing my faith for the very first time, kind of decided to make it my own, had some experiences that I really felt God made himself real. But didn't really understand that, no, there's character development that needs to happen. I just thought, oh, wow, God's real. That means all I have to do is just say a prayer and snap my fingers, and then the Red Sea parts. And you kind of forget that, no, there was probably 40 years of wandering that happened prior, of character development, prior to all of a sudden this just snap your finger, God moments. So interesting question. Yeah, thanks for opening that door. And I could expound on that even more.
Yeah. Well, thanks for sharing.
That gets me excited.
I can see that. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so the other, I know it was a long form 2 question, but like, what would you say to students then, who are seeing this? This is the thing that I notice for new employees is I try to get it pounded into their heads right away of like, our red lines are not personal. Our attention to the detail and tweaking and critiquing you is not personal. You are going to feel like you're floating for about a year, but I want to reassure you that like you can ask as many questions as you need to. There are no dumb questions for that first year. Please be open, but it still seems like they really get down on themselves. And I can see, so like, what kind of encouragement would you give to students coming into practice like this?
Yep. So this is really our intro. When you get hired at RHET Architecture, I really try to set expectations rooted in reality. And your job description is being told what you did wrong the day before and fixing it. And then tomorrow you're going to be told what you did wrong the day before and fixing it. And that's going to continue for quite a while. and have the emotional aptitude to just recognize that your job description is making mistakes. And so we have permission to make as many mistakes as you want from here until the end of time. I honestly don't even get bothered by mistakes. The job description is being honest. And so in the interview, and I've even done this when teaching at NDSU, we do role play. I make every student say, I don't know, let me write down the question and get back to you. And just forcing someone to say, I don't know. I mean, when I was trying to use the fax machine, was too insecure to say, I don't know. And so we role play and say, I don't know. Let me find out the answer. And that's the expectation. So you can make as many mistakes as you want, but you have to be honest. And we just own our mistakes and say, hey, I made a mistake, and now let's fix it together. I also tell staff too, I say, hey, you can make as many mistakes. Your job description is to do the best you can and be honest, and I'll take the fault. So when there's a victory, I'll give you the credit. And when there's a mistake, it's my fault, not your fault. I never point the blame. I think if you're the firm owner, my job is to take the blame for the team's mistakes, whether that's an engineer that doesn't even work for us. I don't go to an owner and be like, well, my engineer didn't do a good job. And no, my team made a mistake. I'm the source of the problem. Now I will be the source of the solution. Here, I can't take back time, but we can, we have option A, B, or C. Which one would you prefer?
So important. I stress that so much on the show multiple times, that how much better would society be is if more people were saying, I don't know, confidently. All the way up to the politicians. Boy, that would be really helpful if they just once said, I don't know. I'll look into that. Thanks for bringing it up. Instead of just bloviating and then making and then doubling down on all of this stuff. I'm curious to know, so, teaching in NDSU and all the volunteer work, you don't go into teaching to make money. You go into teaching to give back. And then plus all the volunteer work, where does that passion come from? And what is it for you to do to give that kind of time?
It's more of, if you have an opportunity to do something good, then say yes, and set your boundaries. So when like this project in Calabar, Nigeria, I kind of was like, oh my goodness, kind of overwhelming. I said, it was spearheaded by a real visionary who's not detailed, who's like, oh, we're going to start a new university in a foreign country. Recognizing that he really doesn't quite understand all the details that go into designing a building and production, but he's there to raise money, to set the vision and kind of push the project along. And so I said yes to this level. I said, hey, I can help you do a master plan that can then be used as a talking tool in your fundraising. And then a year passed and I thought maybe it died. Then they call up, hey, how about a building? And I'm like, well, actually, we've got capacity. So we say yes. And my policy is just, if we have the ability and capacity to do something, we say yes. And if we don't, we say yes, but here are terms, it needs to have an elongated timeline, or, I don't just say yes to make them happy. I say yes because, yes, I can perform with excellence this task. And, over time, all of a sudden your resume kind of builds up with a lot of pro bono work and a lot of volunteering. It wasn't all done in the same month. And so, it's kind of fun, too. There's a satisfaction comes in doing the right thing.
Yeah, it's very fulfilling. 100%. Yeah. I mean, there's that part of it too. Exactly. You can go to bed and sleep well, knowing when you give like that within the boundaries too. I appreciate that. What advice would you give somebody who is thinking about starting their own firm? Knowing what you kind of already talked about with all of your trajectory that kind of led you to starting your own firm. If there's any one piece of advice you could give prospective people, what would that be?
Well, know yourself, know your gifts, know your strengths, know your faults. And that includes just recognizing, are you truly a man? Are you, I call it a three-legged stool. The entrepreneur, he's the designer, he's the blank sheet of paper is inspiring. Then there's the manager. They're the people that keep the wheels greased. keep the oil change, keep the machine going. They're very good at organization. They're very good at systems. You also have the technician who's just very good at executing their craft. You need all three, and you might be good at two, but there's going to be one that usually you have the strongest one, and then you have one that you can kind of cover for, and then probably the other is you're absolutely horrible. And you need then someone else to come alongside and cover for that critical component that you might be lacking. And so know yourself would be one. I think probably the most important, and go into it with some sobriety.
Yeah, and humility. I mean, this seems like a constant theme, and I attest. It seems like it feels like fair to attest a lot of your success to really having that humility. I mean, just so everybody knows, one of the awards that Rhett was talking about is basically he graduated at the top of the class. Right? You won the Peter F. McKinsey Award.
Correct. Yep.
Yeah, which I did too. And when you like, the competition is so stiff at NDSU for that award that you really feel like you've accomplished something there. So to see that kind of an ego check, again, Rhett, I did not expect I appreciate the conversation actually went here in this direction for that.
Well, here's the thing. I'm not void of ego. And I think you need to have some confidence, but it's got to be kept in check. And, when I first graduated, I had a big ego with insecurity, which is the worst combination ever. Okay. Now I would like to say that I am very secure and can say, I don't know, and not have it be a detriment, but then, no ego. You got to be humble. So confidence with humility is the polar opposite of, arrogance with insecurity.
Bingo.
And if I could have gotten that right, I really feel like I could have avoided a lot of agony in my early years. In hindsight, now enough time has passed where I really feel like maybe that was a benefit, in the sense that if we have young guys working here, man, if they make a mistake, I am so sympathetic. I am like, look, you can make as many mistakes as you want. It doesn't bother me. We will fix it together. All I ask is for you to say, I don't know, or I made a mistake. And I shelter them from, I just say, hey, if you have to send a nasty gram or some hard email, that's my job. You have to send an email to a client saying, hey, our timeline needs adjusting. That's my job. And then I let them do they get all the victories, because at the end of the day, I'm still the firm owner, and it's kind of like the coach. I might not be throwing the winning touchdown pass, but I'm the coach of the quarterback who threw the winning touchdown pass. And for me, that's really satisfying. I really enjoy that role.
That is such leadership right there. We're coming up on the half hour, and I've got two questions that I ask every guest at the end here. First one is, knowing what you know now, and if you could go back in time when you first started your business, what is one piece of advice you'd give your former self?
I kind of just answered that.
I feel like you did too.
Yeah. I don't know if there'd be anything to add. A little more humility.
Yeah, that was good.
And yep.
Rhett, this has been fantastic. I feel like I should have you on at least once a year, because there's multiple questions I didn't even get to ask you. It just was a really nice, free-flowing conversation, and it pulled stuff out of you that I was not expecting. If people want to learn more about what you do, where can people find and follow you and your work?
Our website and Facebook. So if you want to see what I did maybe a year ago, then you can look at our website, and maybe 2 years outdated. I try to keep Facebook up to date a little more frequently. I could really learn from you in terms of marketing. I have marketed myself 100% word of mouth, and am really behind the curve when it comes to promoting online. And so I'm gonna check out a few more of your podcasts, because I think that's an area where if you want to learn how to market, don't follow RHET Architecture, follow F9 Production. But you do get a little feel and glimpse of the type projects that we're involved in, on Facebook and our website.
Well, thanks. I'm flattered for that. I that is kind of how we landed where we landed, was the internet first, and then sort of now we're kind of catching up to folks like yourself with word of mouth. Episode 277 last Friday is perfect for that. Why you should spend money on Google AdWords, why you should build up that Google business profile and all of that. Rhett, this has been fantastic. Thank you so much for your time today.
A lot of fun.
Yeah, I hope to see you in person and do a dinner one of these days.
Yeah, keep doing great work, you and Al. I love following your work. It's inspiring.
Thanks, buddy. Okay, we'll see you.
Mhm.